Today is a fabulous day to be interviewing Taylor Kane, our fearless Remember the Girls founder and executive director. Taylor is a carrier of adrenoleukodystrophy, also known as ALD. My name is Emma Bliss, and I'm the current president for Remember the Girls, helping Taylor run this amazing organization. We are co-hosting these carrier connections for you all to bring awareness, education, support, and advocacy to our group. Remember the Girls' mission is to raise awareness to the many issues facing female carriers of X-linked genetic disorders. And this is our very first interview for Carrier Connections, where we will be featuring a different X-linked disease every single month and interviewing carriers or manifesting heterozygote women weekly. This month, we are featuring ALD. This video, this audio, they'll both be recorded and shared on our social media platforms and our website, rememberthegirls.com. Please check us out there. We have a ton of merchandise in store, women's stories and biographies. We have toolkits, as well as a safe space to reach out and ask questions. Okay, I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Taylor, and I'm so excited and grateful to be here with you all. Taylor is 22 years young and has spent most of her life as a rare disease advocate, having lost her father to ALD when she was 5 years old. Taylor is a published author, and her book, Rare Like Us, is amazing and available on Amazon today. I highly recommend that you read it and learn more about her amazing journey as a carrier of ALD. Taylor, hi, and welcome. I'd love for you to just dive right in and share a bit of your story and journey to what brought you to where you are today.
Of course. Thanks, Emma. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Kane. I'm the founder and executive director of Remember the Girls. I entered into the world of rare disease in 2001 when I was 3 years old. My dad was diagnosed with adrenoleukodystrophy, or ALD for short, after experiencing strange behavioral changes. He got an MRI, which showed that he had a demyelination of the white matter in his brain, which is the cardinal cause of the symptoms of ALD. ALD is a rare neurological disorder. And since it is an X-linked disease, it primarily affects boys and men, boys who have the early onset version and men who have the later onset versions of the disease. However, a lot of female carriers are affected too. When my dad was diagnosed, my family was told that since it's an X-linked disease, I was an obligate carrier of ALD, so 100% a carrier, that we didn't need to go test to confirm, just that, my dad passed his X on to me, and this made me a carrier of the disease, and that I would have a 50% chance of passing it on when I had kids one day, but that there was nothing really we had to worry about because, they said women really aren't affected, so there's nothing to worry about. Over the next 2 years, my dad progressively got sicker. He lost the ability to walk, talk, swallow. He developed early onset dementia, and he passed away in 2003 when I was 5 years old. Growing up, I always knew that I was a carrier. My mom was always really open with me about it, and I'm definitely personally an advocate for knowledge is power, and that knowing early has influenced my life in a positive way. As Emma said, I'm 22 now, and I can't remember a time that I didn't know my carrier status, and I'm glad that it's that way, because I feel like it has prepared me for my future and also made me more comfortable with what lies ahead, whether that be pursuing alternative reproduction to have children that don't have the disease, and also with my risk of getting symptoms. I've had time to prepare for what to do if and when I feel like I'm starting to experience symptoms. And I'm also really connected with the ALD community specifically. So, I'm really close with a lot of the women in the community, such as Sydney. So we're kind of all in this together, where I know if I have a specific worry about, an ALD symptom, I know a lot of people that I can turn to. But as far as Remember the Girls goes, sorry, Emma, did you have a question about that, or?
No, I was going to say, community is everything. That's what we're all about. I have a question about the how you found out you were a carrier. Was it through genetic testing done on your dad or through yourself?
It was through my dad's testing when they confirmed that he had the disease.
Mm-hmm.
They also just said that I was an obligate carrier. So those of us in our group who have found out from their father having the disease are all obligate carriers, which just means we don't need confirmatory testing to know. But then, those who have a mother carrier need to get that testing because since they have a 50% chance of being a carrier as well. But yeah, so that's when we found out. As far as like me specifically finding out, I honestly don't remember. When my mom first told me, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old, but I've just known for a really long time that I had this genetic thing that I could pass down, but I also knew that there were options that existed. I have an older cousin who's in her early 40s who is also a carrier. Because after my dad was diagnosed, he had an identical twin brother who was also diagnosed with the disease soon after. And so my cousin is a carrier, but she's gone through IVF with PGT twice and has 3 children, without the ALD gene. So I've always known that options existed. So, I think I never really was like upset to know my carrier status. I guess it was just sort of something that just the cards that like I was dealt genetically, and it's not like there was anything my dad did or someone in our family did to cause this.
And is your uncle affected with ALD as well?
Yeah, so my dad's twin brother, identical twins, so they have the same DNA. So I guess it's kind of weird because in the moment my dad was diagnosed, that automatically meant my uncle had the disease too. But my uncle didn't have symptoms yet, but he started having symptoms a few years after and passed away a few years after my dad did.
That's interesting that it would be so different on identical twins, right? You'd assume that they have similar cell structures as identical twins.
Yeah, I know. And I think that just shows, with all genetic diseases, that there's some sort of environmental impact. I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one really knows what that is, but that there's some other influence, that it's not just in our genes, but, that there's something else at play.
So my question for you, it ties into what Sydney just wrote as well. Is she wrote, what advice would you give young girls with recent diagnosis in the community? And my question to you is, if you could go back to before you knew you were a carrier, before it all began, I know you were young at that point, you were really young, but what would you tell yourself if you could put yourself in those shoes?
I would tell myself that I would tell myself not to worry. Things in the future are definitely going to be difficult and you're going to have to deal with difficult decisions. You're going to have to deal with, having relationships and having to tell, high school boyfriends about your carrier status. And that's not going to be something that's easy. But I would also tell myself and also young girls with a recent diagnosis to have hope because, we all have to face the fact that we could and likely will get symptoms. In our most recent ALD female studies, they believe that over 90% of ALD carriers eventually get symptoms.
Wow.
So
That's
our
a big number.
community, our community has a lot of symptomatic women. But I do feel like by the time that I may experience them, they're very closely related to age. So women usually start experiencing symptoms in their 40s, but they definitely can younger as well. But I do think by that time that there will be more research, there will be more options. So I would just say to have hope because, things definitely could be.
So what is something you wish more people knew about carriers of ALD? And if you don't mind going into more specifics, like what kind of symptoms do carriers typically have? I know you said it's around the 40 age group, but what are those symptoms that they first start experiencing?
Yeah, so we definitely still need more research on the symptoms, because right now I feel like they're categorized somewhat vaguely. Um, but females with ALD experience neuropathy, walking difficulties, numbness in their legs, dystonia, tremors, bladder and bowel dysfunction is also a really common symptom. And they are really common to symptoms that men with one of the phenotypes of the disease, AMN, experience as well. And for a long time, they called carriers symptoms like women with AMN, because they just kind of clumped us in with the men. But there are symptoms that we have that men don't have, such as dystonia. And I think that just goes to show, like, we need our own independent research, and we can't just be assumed to be less symptomatic men. Like we're women, we have two X chromosomes, like our bodies deal with disease differently. Our bodies, are just different than a biological male body. So we experience the disease differently.
Yeah.
If there was,
what challenges do you think our future as carriers, or specifically carriers of ALD, what challenges do you think our future will hold as carriers, and what do you hope for the future of ALD carriers?
right. Do you want me to address this first, or address what is something I wish more people knew?
Both. You
Okay.
choose whatever you want to share.
Okay.
Comfortable.
What is something I wish more people knew about carriers of ALD? Probably similar to what I just said, that we are not just less symptomatic men. X-linked diseases have long been thought to be boys' diseases. And I think they see girls or women who get symptoms sort of as like this really rare anomaly. But in fact, many of us ALD carriers do experience symptoms, and they're not just male symptoms, but less severe. Like, they are female symptoms, and we need them to be researched, yes, in connection to the symptoms that men can experience, because it's, the same gene, but we need, research that's done while also looking at, the female biology and the female body, and how these symptoms impact the female body specifically. So that's something that I wish more people knew about carriers of ALD.
Yeah, the topic of X inactivation is very large, and it's growing. People are talking more about it because of you and these organizations. X inactivation is not exactly what they thought it was 20, 30, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It's changed so much, and it's growing, and it's awesome to see, and figure out why carriers are having symptoms. I mean, it's not like, it's not as 50-50 as you think with the X chromosomes, right, in your cells. So it'll grow, and it'll continue to be. I have huge hope for our future, but I would love for you to address that too. What do you hope for the future of ALD carriers personally?
So personally, in the ALD community specifically, just to preface this, every X-linked disease community is different, and they all have their language and things that they prefer. For the ALD community specifically, just because so many carriers experience symptoms, and because a lot of those symptoms are pretty severe, like a lot of our carriers, especially when they're older and wheelchairs, walkers, etc. I hope for the ALD community is that we get rid of the term carrier altogether, just because so many women, especially those who are highly symptomatic, do not call themselves carriers. They do not want to be called a carrier by a doctor, because when they go into a doctor's appointment, and they, if a doctor they haven't met before, it's like, oh, you're just a carrier, and they're clearly symptomatic, but the literature from 10 years ago says differently. So I want the ALD community to get rid of the term carrier altogether. And some of our doctors are already doing that. And a lot of other X-linked communities like Fabry disease, or OTC, they've already done that. So I don't think it's too wild of an ask, but it's what I hope for.
What would you prefer the term that they use?
This is a good question. Probably just women or females with the disease. I think getting rid of the term carrier for all X-linked would be difficult, just because I don't know what could replace it. There's like heterozygotes, but that's so scientific sounding. So I'm not really sure, but
Yeah, I
right
keep
now,
hearing that manifesting heterozygote, and I like, I mean, it works, right? Like it works, but it's also doesn't, it's not an easy word to say.
yeah, it's a hard conversation though, because me, sometimes I'll call myself a carrier and sometimes I'll call myself a female with ALD. I don't consider myself a patient, of course, because I don't have symptoms at the moment. But I can also see why some women who don't have symptoms and are younger would rather refer to themselves as a carrier because, it has like less serious connotations. And I can see why some people do prefer that. But I think the ALD community seems pretty on board, especially the women, that we just don't want the term carrier to exist in our community anymore. And this is not something that I've thought over that's new. Like a lot of the symptomatic women in our community have been fighting for this for years before I even got involved in advocacy. So it's been a long time coming, but I do feel that Remember the Girls and our carrier advocacy has made a difference in that. So
Yeah. I'd love to know what else you've been involved with for research efforts for ALD carriers. I know that you have done quite a bit, and I'd love for you to share that here too.
yeah, so two different things. I've done some things like on behalf of young ALD carriers. I guess it could be considered research, but a while ago, I think when I was like 17, I did a survey to try to find out like the needs of the younger carrier community, just because I felt like, those needs weren't really even thought about. I've also done some, surveys within Remember the Girls. Our webinar next week for Carrier Connections, we'll have Jennifer, who is a genetic counseling student. She actually just graduated. She did a survey, a study within our community, not just for ALD carriers, but all the carriers living in the US and our community over the age of 18. So she's going to be presenting those results next week. She's also submitted the thesis to journals, and I'm like a contributing author on it, which is really cool. So hopefully it gets accepted. As far as personally being involved in research, I'm super eager to be involved in research. I have participated in a few like virtual ALD surveys. Since I'm not symptomatic right now, there just isn't much opportunity for me to be involved. But the doctors and researchers in our community know that I really want to be, and that I'm super willing to have myself be sort of like a guinea pig and be watched and monitored like over the years to see how and when symptoms progress. Like I'm honestly totally fine with that. Like sign me up. So I'm looking forward to being involved more. And I'm also really grateful for all the women in my community who have been involved in the research studies for ALD women, because, they've like paved the way for the research that has happened and that is yet to come. So I'm really thankful for all that they've done.
Yeah, it's exciting to be a part of the change, right?
Definitely.
Okay. Well, to end this conversation, I would love for you to give me your one word. When you think of Remember the Girls and the future for women carriers of X-linked disorders, what is the first word that comes to mind?
The first word that comes to mind when I think of the Remember the Girls community is empowered. I think our community is full of so many women who don't take no for an answer, and they want to be heard, and they want females with X-linked conditions to have equal treatment. They want them to have research. They want them just to not be an afterthought any longer. So I think our community is full of, 850 now, almost 900 empowered women from all around the world.
I love it. That's a perfect word for you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions. If anybody wants, you can type it in the chat box or just unmute yourself if you have any questions for Taylor. Thank you, Taylor. Anyone?
I think we have one from Tessa.
Yeah, it was about the moving away from the carriers term, which it is funny to talk about because I know I don't want to say it, but then I say the word and I'm like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said carriers.
Yeah, it's hard also because, I haven't tried to move away from that and remember the girl sense because, most of society, most of medicine, most people still use that term. But I think it's just a larger conversation that our group has caused of like, what does this word really mean? And I don't know if it's at the end of the day getting rid of the word altogether, or just kind of redefining it, and not making it so exclusive for people to assume that this means a carrier is asymptomatic. And even beyond being symptomatic, I think getting brushed off as just a carrier also puts our other concerns, as not that important. Like, I think people are like, oh, that's so like, you have it lucky, you're just a carrier. Well, there's still a lot of, mental health and psychosocial complications that come with being a carrier. There's difficult decisions with having children. There's financial implications with having children or with your, own health or life insurance. Like, I think even regardless of symptoms, just the carrier label seems to like just kind of brush off everything that we have to deal with. So
yes, I agree. I know a lot of women that would agree with that 100%. Have you had issues? You brought up life insurance. Has that been an issue for you?
not for me, no, but I have heard confusion about like how a carrier status can impact life insurance. I know we have like a Genetic Information Discrimination Act, so it shouldn't affect health insurance. But I guess, your carrier status could be defined as a pre-existing condition, and I'm not 100% sure. I hope it doesn't, but
We do have a question. It says, what differences, if any, have you found when it comes to carriers in the UK, Europe generally, or different countries? That's a good one. I wonder, well, healthcare is so different, right? I mean,
yeah, I think this might be less about carriers in different countries, but just the way that like disease or illness is discussed. I don't think I know Michelle is staring at me right now for being from the UK, but this is also a generalization, but I do think that the US is definitely more open and willing to have discussions about their personal health than the UK or some European countries. And then, other countries in certain areas, like some Asian countries or countries that English is not their first language, they don't even have words in their language for genetics and for X-linked. And, I don't know how we will bridge that gap because it's not even like it's a language barrier. It's, the fact that those languages don't even have the words to kind of explain what women with X-linked diseases are going through. And, of course, we have women with X-linked diseases in every country in the world. But for some, that language is just not there. So I definitely, as Remember the Girls continues to grow, want to see Remember the Girls tackle that more.
yes.
It's also exciting continuing to get new members from outside of the US. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot from the UK, from Canada, from Australia, from some other European countries. We have a member from Vietnam. So just hoping to continue to grow that international presence.
Yes. Wonderful. That would be, I mean, that would be ideal. We want to reach more people and help. We want that to grow that community outside of the US. I think we do run into a lot of healthcare issues just simply because every country is so different. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, especially with, the financial implications that come with alternative reproduction or genetic testing, for example. Um, and I do think that every country's healthcare system, I'm sure, has certain issues that people in the rare disease community especially have to face. I think, yeah, I don't think any country is an easy place for someone impacted by rare disease to be in, just because so little policy and things have been made for our community. But I think it's definitely improving. And I definitely would love in the future also to like have more information that our group creates so we can kind of compare what it's like for carriers in different countries, or how costly it is to like go through a certain reproductive option, even in every different state. Like there is no data on that really.
Yeah.
So that would be good to have for sure.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we will be recording this. It's being recorded, and then we'll transcribe it to our blog. We are also adding it to our podcast. If you have any questions, just reach out to us in our group. Taylor, thank you so much. This was awesome. But again,
Yeah.
if you want to know more about Taylor's story, she did publish a book, and it is available on Amazon. And you should read it. It's amazing. So thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for the interview.
Of course. All right. Bye, guys.